To give you some context, my boyfriend, Paul, 34, went to a party a few weeks ago. When he came back, he seemed distant, and a few days later, I found out he had been texting a woman named Natalie, 28, who was somehow connected to his childhood best friend. At first, he never mentioned it, so I had to bring it up and ask him what was going on. Every time I asked, his story kept changing. He initially said he reached out to her to clear the air about something, claiming that she had a crush on him. But when I confronted him, he said he didn't know she had feelings for him at the time. When I read their conversation, though, it seemed pretty clear she had made it known. Then, he shifted his explanation, saying he contacted her just to avoid any awkwardness since he couldn't remember their conversation. After that, he quickly changed the topic and started talking about problems in our own relationship. To give you some important context, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. He didn't mention reaching out to another woman, an ex, in the past. We've been living together for 2 years, been a couple for almost 4, and we're even talking about starting a family in the near future. It's been weeks, but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. It feels sketchy, and I can't ignore that uneasy feeling. I told him that if it was just about ego, and he kept asking her if she liked him, then that was fine. But he just kept repeating that he contacted her to avoid things being awkward. But I can't help but feel there's more to it than he's letting on. Honestly, I'm just uncomfortable with the whole thing. He was drunk enough to forget what happened with another woman, then needed to reach out to her about it. And on top of that, he's brushing it off, telling me I've broken his trust for reading his messages. He kept saying that if he was cheating, or planned to, why would he leave the conversation where I could see it? Here's a snippet of the exchange between Paul and Natalie. Paul: Hey, I probably should have texted you yesterday, but I wasn't feeling too great. What happened at the bar on Sunday? Natalie: Hey, no worries, I figured you weren't feeling well. But you tell me what happened, or are you forgetting a few things? Paul: I don't even remember getting home. I just know I left the bar feeling pretty lost. Natalie: You and your guy friend disappeared at the end, but I'm glad you made it home safely, even if you were confused. But I didn't do anything wrong, did I? Paul: I don't remember anything you did wrong, but I'm curious, what was your take on things? Natalie: Well, it's hard to say. I think you had a lot to drink, and that probably changed things, unless there's more you're remembering from your side? Paul: Did I imagine it, or did you mention at one point that you liked me? Natalie: We mostly talked about when we first met. Paul: Oh, so you liked me back then? Paul: Or maybe I was just way too drunk and misunderstood. Natalie: Well, you did mention I was all over you at the time. Natalie: But you have a girlfriend, and I really like her, so I couldn't ever think about anything like that. Paul: And nothing else happened? Why was I so confused? I must have misread the situation. Natalie: Nothing happened. You've got a girlfriend. Natalie: It's all kind of strange, but I think we'd both feel pretty bad if something did happen. Paul: Strange, confusing, and definitely drunk. Natalie: Maybe, but also kind of guilty. P.S. That evening, she actually texted me saying she wished I was there and complaining about things. I sent him a message that night, and he saw it, but he didn't reply to any of it. Normally, he always responds, even if it's late, but this time, he just read my messages and didn't say a word. I hardly ever text him when he's out, and I don't expect him to reply, but the few times I do reach out, he always answers. This was the first time he just read my message and didn't respond at all. A few updates and details: due to serious health issues I'm currently dealing with, I can't bring myself to leave. Not to mention, I'm partially afraid of making the wrong decision, and I still love him. I'm really struggling with what to do. We've had a few talks where I told him that we couldn't keep going like this. For the past 3 years, he asked me to support him through everything while he worked 2 jobs and went back to school. During that time, he was hardly involved in our relationship and treated me terribly. I ended up doing all the household chores, basically becoming his maid, and we barely had any intimacy because he said it was distracting and drained his energy. At first, it started with him not wanting to kiss me outside of intimate moments because it would turn him on. Then it escalated to no hugs because even that was apparently too much. Eventually, we were only having sex once or twice a month, if that. He often rejected me and never initiated. We talked about it a lot because it was really hurting me. He'd say he preferred when I took the lead, even though he'd often turn me down, claiming he wasn't in the mood. This went on while he worked long hours or spent all his free time gaming. For 3 years, we barely went on any dates, maybe 3 or 4 dinners at restaurants or pubs. He'd tell me that traditions like Christmas or my birthday didn't matter. Last year, he played video games until late, and when I went to him to chat, I jokingly took off his headphones to say something. He got upset really quickly, stood up, and physically pushed me. I immediately backed off emotionally, telling him that it wasn't right to react that way and that I was just trying to talk to him. I reminded him that it was my birthday and, if there was any day he should be nice to me, it should have been then. I went to the bedroom, and he came in later, around midnight or 1 a.m. I was watching something and he asked, "Are you going to keep watching this, or are we going to watch something together?" I told him I was already halfway through the movie, and he didn't seem bothered to come spend time with me earlier. I wasn't in the mood, and honestly I was hurt, but I didn't show it. After finishing the movie, I cried silently about how things were going. He was lying with his back to me, asleep, and when he woke up, he put on his headphones so he wouldn't hear me. I confronted him about it, and he called me a princess, telling me no one cared about my birthday. I kept saying that this wasn't how it was supposed to be, that we should have had a good time, and I didn't mean to upset him. I told him I was just trying to be playful, and his reaction was unexpected and violent. I grabbed his headphones and refused to let go. I shouldn't have done that, and honestly it showed just how desperate I was to make him understand. I should have walked away. A few months before that, I had tried to break up with him, but he promised he would change, be nicer, do better. His best friends backed him up, and they helped us get back together. They were shocked when I finally told them how he was treating me. He often called me not smart, or tried to belittle me, saying he was smarter than I was. Just to give you some background, I'm a pretty studious person. I went to university and was accepted into a double-degree program, one in law and the other in international trade, with 2 foreign languages included. I didn't finish it due to COVID and some family issues, but I didn't stop learning. I continued tutoring and giving private lessons on the side to stay connected with the academic world. I'm also someone who's always been active in charity work, though I can't do much of it now because I'm so busy. I was often the president or in charge of fundraising, and I'd invite important speakers, even hosting events similar to TED Talks. When we first started talking, I had 3 jobs: working in hospitality, tutoring privately, and acting as a hostess at medical and political events. A few days before we met, I was wrapping up my last gig before moving to the same country. The move had already been planned, as a headhunter had contacted me about a job offer at a large company. At that time, I was the head hostess at a big European ministerial congress, managing a team of hostesses and coordinating with the delegation, security, and higher-ups. I was the one in charge on site, with just one person above me, and everything was on me to manage. I'm someone who loves to stay active and is always eager to share and learn new things. Early on, he used to tell me I was out of his league, but I'd always tell him that wasn't true. Later on, after he'd shown me his best side and proved he was a good person, he told me I needed to lower my standards, saying that he'd only shown me the good parts of himself when we first started dating in order to win me over. I continued dating him because he told me things would get better, and that the situation we were in was mainly because of the amount of work he was handling. I understood that, as I'd worked hard for a long time before we met, juggling multiple jobs. During that period, I wasn't in a relationship, so I didn't know how work could affect things. But I did know how draining and stressful it was at times, so I did my best to be supportive. Anyway, after my last post, or maybe it was just before, I can't quite remember the exact timeline, I left the country. The housing situation had been affecting my health, and it was getting worse. I needed to prepare for extensive surgery, so I decided to go to my parents' place where I could take better care of myself. The house we were living in was deteriorating. He didn't want to move out of the place, and he guilt-tripped me into not moving on my own. He said he was open to moving but didn't actually want to. I spent weeks and months searching for new places, taking days off from work to visit potential homes, but he never looked for anything himself. He'd tell me it was my responsibility to handle it because he was too busy. I ended up giving up on moving, even though it was severely affecting my well-being. The small space, proximity to roommates, and cold, damp climate of the country meant I couldn't work out like I used to. Because of the housing situation and my deteriorating physical and mental health, I felt completely unsupported. He would get frustrated with the side effects of my medication, which sometimes made me drowsy or forgetful. He'd get mad at me for not being able to do chores or for not keeping the bedroom tidy. Just before I left, he was upset with me for 2 or 3 weeks because the bedsheets were messy and I was sick with tissues everywhere. He often told me I was weak because I kept getting sick. Normally, I don't get sick often, but since moving into that house, I started to get sick regularly. By the way, the house we lived in had black mold, broken windows that didn't fully close, and freezing temperatures in the bedroom. He often complained about the electricity bill, even though we were both paying the rent and splitting it with our housemate. We had the smallest bedroom, but it allowed us to save money. Each of us only paid around 500 to 600 euros, including utilities. It's considered high for living in a shared house, especially in a bedroom that felt like Harry Potter's closet, but the housing market was tight and expensive. He also refused to let me put up some heat control curtains I bought to help with the cold, even though they'd help with noise from the highway nearby and keep the temperature more comfortable. He said he liked waking up to natural light, and even though I begged him, telling him it was making me sick, he refused. He'd just call me weak and say I wasn't built like him. I left because I needed to focus on my health. I just got back a day ago to attend some medical appointments, and he's been okay, nice even, except for some complaints about having to tidy the bedroom when I left. I had told him ahead of time that I wasn't able to do it, as I had caught a viral infection that was affecting my lungs, and I had a high fever and was breathless. Even during that time, I still cooked, but when I asked him if he could help with some chores, he refused. That was just another confirmation that I needed to leave, both for my physical and mental health. I told him that after my surgery and recovery, we would need to have a serious conversation about our relationship. But at that moment, I couldn't take the energy to focus on it. My health had to be my priority. I also told him that after everything, we needed to talk because I felt like we weren't on the same page. We both wanted things from each other that the other wasn't able to give, which wasn't who we truly were, if that makes sense. Being away helped me see and realize a lot of things about our relationship, how little I had a voice in it, how he barely showed any care, and how much he asked from me while simultaneously telling me I was needy and asking too much of him. During the rare moments when we had heart-to-heart conversations, which I always initiated, he admitted that I'd barely asked anything from him. And when I did ask, he often refused. What I realized now is that it wasn't just the verbal abuse or the occasional physical stuff, like him pushing me or throwing things at me. It was the small daily things that hurt. If I was watching something, he'd take the remote and switch to his own show, without asking me or letting me finish. The birthday incident was one of the few times he actually let me watch my program. He'd come to me and say, "I'm hungry," without even a please or "thank you." I'd often have to remind him to say thank you, which would just make him pissed off. And if I didn't cook, he'd either be pissed or not eat, only to later complain that he was starving because he didn't eat, even though he could cook for himself. If I cooked my favorite meals instead of his, I'd hear complaints about it. He once made a list of his favorite meals, and I had to follow it, cooking fresh meals every day. He refused to eat anything frozen or pre-cooked, saying he could taste the difference. If I cooked the same meal too often or made larger portions to have leftovers, he'd complain about that too. I once told him I wasn't TripAdvisor because he kept criticizing meals I made, even when he said they were really good but could have been better. The irony is, one of his favorite things about me was that I was a great cook. When I came back, I discovered that he had thrown out one of my pillows, which I use for my back or to get more comfortable. It wasn't the best pillow, but it was mine, and the fact that he threw it away without asking me really bothered me. It reminded me of the times when he would throw my things on the ground if he didn't like something or couldn't find something. Another side note, on my birthday, he smashed my phone on the ground. He later took me to brunch with a nice view, but it felt off because I had specifically asked him if we could drive by the ocean for my birthday instead of going to our town, since we were both tired of it. He ended up taking me to a place with a full view of the town. He was mad at me for asking him to plan something, even though it was my birthday. I'm leaving again soon to go back to my parents' house for a while. I never did this whole thing before, but it's a privilege to be able to. I'm really grateful for it. I've been away from my family home since I was 16 due to my parents' divorce, conflicts, and studying far away. I had to cut myself off from a lot of things, and while I've always been okay with that, I'm now thankful I can rely on them for support, not financially, but just having a place to stay if I need it and people who care. So that's the update. He's been okay, not too bad in terms of our interactions, though he's still got his temper when it comes to chores he's had to deal with, and I tried to keep things calm by being sweet, thanking him, or trying to make light of it, which works well. But today, I think he's going to be pissed off again. He was upset about something, but I can't remember what it was. Right now, he's sulking on his side of the bed. Hopefully, things will be okay. I've got one last big appointment, then I'll leave again, and I won't be back for several weeks. That gives me more time to focus on myself and my health. Thanks so much for your support. Yes, I fought against his behavior, not physically, of course, just emotionally, many times. There was one moment when I tried to be toxic and threw a towel or a t-shirt at him, and I quickly regretted that. I've never done anything like that again because I truly don't understand why people resort to violence. It never gets to the point or helps anything. I tried everything. I even tried to leave a few times and broke up with him, but then his friends and he would plead with me to come back, and I was too weak to stay away. So I just went back. I thought things were improving. He started spending more time with me, and when my health declined, he tried to be more present. We even went on a vacation that he paid for and planned alone, saying it was both my birthday and Christmas gift. For a few weeks, he seemed to try, but then he started pulling away again. He told me that he didn't know if he wanted to marry me, but at the same time, he was still talking about marriage in front of family and friends. He asked me multiple times, "If I were to propose right now, would you say yes?" He even said it in front of his parents and siblings, and maybe his friends, though I can't remember the exact details. I was doing the same, to be fair, because I thought that despite everything, we could get through it. I thought we'd be able to move out, my health would improve with treatment and surgery, and everything would be better. But the more he saw how much my health was deteriorating, the more he pulled away. He started getting distant or angry, even though I wasn't relying on him for anything. I was still doing most of the chores and didn't ask anything from him. He saw it firsthand. Sometimes I had to sit down in the kitchen because I couldn't stand for long periods. I wasn't eating properly because of the medication, though I don't think he noticed or realized it, and I wasn't sleeping well. Being with someone who's sick can be a lot, even when you don't care for them, and I understand that, as much as I can. I'm not in his shoes. But his lack of support really opened my eyes to our future together, and made me rethink everything. I know I'll get my health back, but I won't be able to get back the respect I had from him as a partner. After everything, I told him that marriage and kids were no longer on the table for us. After our talk and the texts we exchanged, I told him I was now only focusing on myself. We would talk about things later, when I'm better. I asked him to wait until after my surgery and recovery, just like I had hoped for the past 3 years, now almost 4, but this time after he finished his studies. I asked if he could wait a few more months. That's all for now. There's a lot more to this story, but I think this is less of an update, and more of me sharing some more details about the dynamics of our relationship.